Let's go ahead and get this started. So my name is Michael Crean. I'm the CEO and founder of Solutions Granted, and we've got the illustrious Mr. Corey Clark here with us today. He is our Director of Threat Intelligence, and we're here to just do a quick, not long, webinar today. I know that we're scheduled for an hour, but we're really going to try to keep this to about 30 minutes. We appreciate everybody's time. We don't want to make any waste of it. So we wanted to do this because it is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we wanted to bring some ideas to the table, some things that we're seeing. Some are more relevant than others, but all of them have a really good principle behind them as to what we're seeing out there, why we're seeing it, and what you can do to defend against it. Mr. Clark, I think it's all on you, sir.
I appreciate it. So the tough thing for me is when I'm being told I have to host a webinar and do one of these tales from the crypt. Well, what scared me the most since we've done one of these? For me, the answer is simple. It is still on-prem exchange. Now, as most of you know, back in March, we had Hafnium. Hafnium hit pretty much everybody in some form or fashion that had an on-prem exchange server. And everybody responded. Vendors responded, we responded, education was out there. We saw everybody patching their servers. Everybody took it very, very seriously. And, it wasn't too much from our partner base that got hit by Hafnium. Well, step into August of this year. What I deemed as Hafnium 2.0 came to light. So it was an exchange proxy cell vulnerability where the threat actors were able to exploit yet another lovely Microsoft vulnerability on the exchange server. And what they were doing was they were bypassing the authentication, executing code in the exact same fashion that they were doing with Hafnium. Now, this got most public view come August. However, the patch to fix this happened in July. Now, I have a little, if it's visible to you guys, a little graph here. Now, this was a graph that was done by a gentleman who analyzed 1,900 servers that he had access to see which patch version these servers were on. And we ran similar patches. So if we had a agent that we were able to identify which version you were having on your exchange server, we ran a scan and we saw the exact same results. Most of our partner base were patched up to either April or May of 2021. So they got their March patches for Hafnium. It stuck with them and they kept patching that server, but for some reason after May, it drops significantly. And so what ends up happening is obviously you did not meet that July patching. So then boom, you're getting hit. The same as what was happening with Hafnium. Now, what we found is, it's again, same as Hafnium, is it was kind of a spray and pray. So you had adversaries out there just blasting out, seeing if there's, checking these public IPs, seeing if exchange servers were there and they can meet these vulnerabilities. They were modifying or dropping ASPX files. They were modifying config files. And that was their initial reconnaissance and access. And then once they got into the environment, they started performing more reconnaissance. Now, what I'm showing you here is a live example of what happened and what we identified for one of our partners. So you can see here on September 25th at 9:50 at night, East Coast time, they connected to the server through IIS to initiate a command prompt. And what they were doing is they ran a who am I command. What that does is it validates for them that they're actually running as a privileged account. Now they waited 3 days because they're not dumb, because if they keep running more and more commands, it's going to be easily identifiable if someone's watching. So they waited 3 days and came in at 6:42 in the morning on the 28th and initiated a command to test if PowerShell was usable on this server, which guess what? It was.
And there's a reason that they came in at 6:42. So if you are a fan of history and military history, you will find through time, and maybe not so much as it is today, but in maybe a decade ago, the ultimate time to attack somebody was either at dawn or dusk for some pretty easy reasons. People are just waking up. Maybe your night shift is just coming off and you're changing guards, but your defenses are typically lower. And this is something that we continue to see itself repeat. And I will say, Corey, I think you had said that for whatever reason, it happens somewhere between 4 and 6 on Sundays. Is that the kind of the golden hours, or what are the
That
hours
is
that we're seeing?
between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. any day of the week is our typical hours that we see.
So
because they're not just accounting for East Coast, which that's still very early for the East Coast. They're also accounting for the West Coast. Because if you think about it, if they try 12 a.m. East Coast time, that's not late enough for West Coast time. So that 4 to 6 o'clock hour East Coast time is prime time. That's where my SOC analysts are really getting hammered with alerts that are coming in, and that's our busiest time. So follow the next day, right? So we're tracking what happened. They initiated a who am I? Let's make sure we're doing privileged access. Waited 3 days, came back in the morning, did a PowerShell to make sure that they can initiate PowerShell and run a PowerShell command. So then they came back at 5:22 the next morning, and this is where they executed their payload. So if you look down here, it's pretty easy to dissect. Where they did a web request, they went out to an IP address that was based out in the Netherlands and downloaded a malicious file. Now, when that file writes to the disk, they're writing it to the Windows temp directory and naming it conhost.exe. Conhost is a common Windows process. So what they're doing is they're trying to circumvent security solutions. They're trying to make it unknown, right? Because any untrained person will see a process or a file named conhost and think it's the default process that's supposed to be running or working on a Windows endpoint. But guess what? You should only see that file in the System32 directory, not the Windows temp directory. And then once they write that file, then they're going to execute that file to infect the endpoint. Now, past that, when that's happening, they're also going to leave persistence. Very common. That persists. They want to keep trying to reinfect the machine, right? So if the first one didn't stick, next time you reboot the machine, and think about how often you reboot your servers. It could be 30 days. Hopefully it's not more than 30 days, because that means you're not doing proper patching. However, it could be 30 days. For some of you, it could be 120 to 300 days. We've seen it until you reboot the server, and then boom, it's going to try to reinfect you all over again. So they laid persistence within the startup directory in the registry. Now you can see here, the error that reported back was the file was not, the specified file was not found. Now, talking about this whole thing, talking about the scenario, exactly how it laid out, there are a lot of things that come into play that comes into protecting you from this type of attack. So when I talk about EPP products, this is your endpoint protection, right? So your antivirus is not enough. So whether you're using Cylance, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, WebRoot, Carbon Black, I can go on and on, it's not going to be enough. Just an AV is not going to be enough to protect you against what just happened in the scenario I gave you. Yes, in this particular situation, Cylance grabbed the payload after it was downloaded to the endpoint and quarantined that. But that's only a small part of what happened. They still have access. They can still try more things. They can still run PowerShell on the endpoint, which could have been blocked if it was configured to do so. So to keep your endpoints protected, you must have a layered approach. And remember, I'm going to say it again, antivirus is not enough. And then add on top of that, there needs to be some form of monitoring and human intervention. The most common thing I hear when I go to these conferences, when I ask someone, and I'm not judging them on their product, a product is just a tool. Everybody, as long as you're doing the right things with the right tools, good on you. But the most common thing I hear is, okay, well, I'm using product XYZ. So my next question is, okay, awesome. Who's monitoring it? Well, we are. Okay. So who's monitoring at Saturday at 2 o'clock in the morning? Well, nobody. Okay, so now you're not going to know about it till Monday. Well, it sends emails. Okay, when are you going to look at the email? Can you honestly tell me that? I mean, some of us are like this. I'm like this. I know Michael's like this. Are you always looking at your email as soon as you wake up? I mean, obviously you're not looking at it 2 o'clock in the morning because you're probably sleeping. But how long is it going to take you until you realize there's been a compromise? And because by then it's probably too late. So you need an active entity consistently monitoring what's happening and have the ability to respond on your behalf. So here's a quick, easy, this is not a catch-all be-all. If you notice, I have a picture of a highway. And this is, I love analogies. If you've talked to me, if you've ever been in any of my demos, you know I love analogies because I think it helps drive it home. And so if you look at your endpoint security as a highway, there's multiple lanes. You have to account for all of these lanes. Antivirus is only going to account for one lane. And so if you got that lane covered, well, what about the other lanes? So you have, in this particular scenario, what could have prevented this is, first off, some type of vulnerability management, patching. If the server was patched up to the July patch level, this would have not hit them in July. The antivirus, you need the antivirus on there to stop the malicious payload, or even stop, in this situation, PowerShell from running. Then you need an EDR solution to identify the behaviors. How do you think we were able to identify that they were connecting and running a who am I command, or that they were checking to see if PowerShell would run on that endpoint? Your antivirus is not going to tell you that. An EDR solution will tell you that. And then stack on top of that some form of MDR service, adding that human element out of it, because EDR is tough. Monitoring behavior is tough because it's subjective. You have to identify, okay, is this a normal behavior that an admin or an RMM tool is doing, or is this something a malicious adversary is doing? Because there's a lot of blurred lines when this happens. So you need trained experts analyzing these behaviors to identify what is actually happening that looks anomalistic, and then be able to respond on your behalf. So when it happens at 2:00 in the morning, boom, we can stop this from happening immediately to figure out how we need to remediate, instead of waiting till you wake up and see that email after it's already too late.
I think maybe where you're going with this, Corey, is the fact that it's like a fireman. Now, you're not waiting until you wake up in the morning for the fireman to come in and put the fire out and help contain it and stop it. It's a response to action at a time that is happening now, not later, but now. And I think there's also that little word that we've been hearing for a very long time called defense in depth. Not about one product. It's about a combination of products that's going to keep you safe, which also leads into what the definition that Gartner's put out there when they talk about an MDR service is. It is not just about a single product. It is about a combination of products that is providing you the security stack that you need, but is also monitored 24/7 with human beings that are there to do this purposeful job. So as we continue on, a data breach can be really scary. Recently, if you've been to any of the ASCII shows, there's a gentleman that lived through a breach where a lot of his customers had been ransomed all at one time. And he tells a really good story. It's not really about what happened. It's not about why it happened. It talks about all of the steps that he went through. And not only was it scary, but it was almost a little debilitating. The fact that they weren't sleeping. And when you go through a time in life where you're not sleeping, you start making bad decisions because your body is a machine. It needs rest. It needs fuel. They weren't eating well. They weren't sleeping. And they started making bad decisions, trying to make the very best decisions that they could. So it gets really scary when you're in that position. What gets a little bit worse is, let's talk about an incident that we were brought into here recently. Brand new partner of ours, actually not a partner when they first called us because, for those of you that don't know, and I think most of you do, we do incident response work. Ask us, hey, we need some advice and guidance. We're seeing something very peculiar on one of our customer servers. We're not sure what it means. So for anybody new that calls, or even one of our partners, you will get my undivided attention when these type of events happen. And we start off with just a quick 30-minute call to get the lay of the land, to understand what's going on. Immediately started asking the questions. All right, let's talk about this environment. Tell me what you're seeing. Tell me what you know. What they noticed is on one of their servers that in every user's profile on the server, there was a ton of text files being dropped on the desktops. The desk that was indicating that something had gone on and that they had control of the system. It's like, okay, well, this is not good. I don't think somebody's playing a hoax on you. I don't think this is trick or treat. We're not quite there yet. So let's look into this a little bit more. Started asking them some simple questions. All right, so do they get remote access to the environment? The answer was yes. Well, please tell me that they're using a VPN. Partner immediately said, yep, absolutely. They're using a VPN. Awesome. Cool. So they're using two-factor authentication. No, they're not using it. They complain that it's too hard. It takes too much time. All of the reasons that we've all heard. All right, cool. We know we've got to get this changed. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look. They had a firewall in there. Here's what I want to see. I want to see the WAN to LAN firewall rules. That's all I care about right now. I just want to see what type of uncontrolled access is getting into the environment. And we immediately found that there was RDP access coming into the environment. It's like, okay, let's figure out where this is going. Unfortunately, as we continued to discover, there was direct RDP access going to their domain controller. Okay, so first of all, the partner was sure that the client was using a VPN. They were not. The partner was not mandating, forcing, or strong arming, or any way they could to get the client to use two-factor. They had direct RDP access to the domain controller. Big, huge problems. All right, we found our smoking gun. We're pretty sure we know how they made their way into the environment. Let's look a little bit deeper. Let's see what else we can find. Can we look and see who the administrators are in the environment? Because everybody should just be a user. And if you have an administrator account, it should not be your user account. So let's take a look at all of the domain admins. So we go in there and we look, and sure enough, the CIO of the organization, the CIO's user account was a domain admin. Big, huge problem. Nobody should ever have their user account with any sort of administrative privileges. It makes it far too easy to take control of an environment and do the wrong thing. My advice to the partner was, here's what you immediately need to do. One, you need to get usernames and password changed on everything. Two, you need to shut down that RDP access. Three, you need to get that CIO out of that domain admin group and make that user account just a user account. And four, you need to have a direct conversation with your customer, tell them how critical this is, tell them how bad it is, tell them that they have an incident on their hand and they have to be concerned. This particular client was also processing sensitive, personally identifiable information that was governed under the compliancy laws of HIPAA. Okay, much bigger deal. Get into it. Make sure that they're aware. Partner went and talked to the client. Didn't hear anything back. A few weeks goes by. We hear from them again. Now it's gotten worse. Now what they're finding is executable files on people's desktops that show patient information, show pictures of the patients that were captured out of cameras. And my immediate statement was like, okay, well, what happened? You explained to them that this was important. I did, but they said that they did not feel that it was very urgent. They didn't think that it was important at all. It's like, well, I didn't understand. I'm getting a little frustrated and it's personally offending me almost to the point. It's like, well, wait a second. I know we assessed the situation properly. I know that this was critically bad and it was going to go from bad to worse. And it did. They chose to push the MSP off and tell them this wasn't a problem. Now they have a huge problem. Now, there was probably already data leakage before that, but now it's definitively clear that data leakage took place. And so now they went from a minor event, call it even a moderate event, to a critical event. And this critical event is going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars because now they have a HIPAA violation on their hand. Unfortunately, this was all preventable. This was another one. Patches on this domain controller for a piece of software that looks like it hadn't been patched and it was a critical vulnerability. We're not talking about a low. We're not even talking about a high. We're talking about a critical, which is a CVE that hit 9 or 10. These are the things that will really disrupt your day. They did not patch for some of these critical vulnerabilities. And they had other critical vulnerabilities, but one of them was backing up. Corey, was it 4 months or 5 months?
I believe it was 6, actually.
Oh, 6 months. Wow. So guys, gals, everybody, we have to understand we have a responsibility. If you go into your surgeon and you tell your surgeon, I trust you, I believe in you, I want to hire you, and your surgeon says to you, okay, you have cancer. We know it for sure. We know exactly where it's at. We know that if we perform surgery, the highest chance of survivability, everything's going to be great. And you look at him and say, yeah, I think I'm going to be okay. I don't need your surgery. Well, I didn't go to school to be a medical doctor. I'm not sure many other people went to school to be a medical doctor. So we have to trust, but we also, and a good surgeon is going to look at you and tell you how wrong you are, tell you that this is going to go from bad to worse. So as you're talking to your clients, as you're making them aware of these common practices, We're not talking about, we're not even talking about buying product at the moment. We're talking about configuring a firewall properly. We're talking about patch management being done properly. We're talking about two-factor authentication. There's lots of free two-factor authentication out there. You know, they say that only 50% of compromises involve malware. So where does anybody think the other 50% is coming from? It's coming from account takeovers. And most of the time, and we've seen this with MSPs, because y'all are so busy taking care of your customers that you really don't take care of yourself as well as you take care of them. You have to start onboarding yourself. We've seen MSPs have an incident. We've seen what looks to be a compromise where somebody's made their way into their desktop, and because they were saving passwords in the browser, an MSP was saving the passwords in the browser, not a password management tool, straight up in Chrome, in the browser. Who knows why? Because, well, we all know why, because it's simple, it's easy, it makes it quick and fast for them to do their job. But the moment that machine was taken over, because there was open RDP access to get in, and hope, let me give you a little trick or tip here. Just because you change the port on it doesn't mean that people aren't going to figure it out. Port scanners are free. They're cloud hosted. They're easy. You can sweep a firewall and scan for 70,000 ports in a matter of minutes and find that open port. Once you hit that open port, that machine's going to tell you what it is. And if you find that it's responding to RDP, it's a gateway straight into the environment. So please don't let these data breaches be scary. You can fix them. You can't let the tail wag the dog. I think people have probably heard me say this before. For those of you that don't know necessarily what that means, so I have an 11-month-old. He is a lab German Shepherd mix, and he is a big meathead. And he has got the biggest case of wiggles you've ever seen. And he's a big dude. I mean, he's probably pushing 80, 85, maybe 90 pounds. And when he gets happy, it is that tail has got his body going all over the place. Don't let your clients be the tail to wag you the dog. You can't afford it. They can't afford it either. And we're not talking about doing hard things. We're just talking about doing right things. It's a very unfortunate situation that that partner was put in. But unfortunately, they weren't forceful enough with the client to get them to know that this was as critical as it gets before it turns into super ugly.
If you want to go ahead and scan this barcode, so we can, again, we're playing on the October theme, guys. Bear with us. So we can carve out some time to speak with you. If you take out your phones and just open up the camera and snap or click on the actual barcode, it will open up your email. It'll pre-populate everything for you. Once you're good with what it says, just hit send. And that'll open up a conversation so we can dive in a little deeper to see what you're currently using, see if there's something that we can do that help complement that or even potentially replace that. You know, we never force anybody to say, hey, you should change just for the sake of changing. You should change just to come over and do what we're doing, right? It always starts with a broader conversation to see, okay, how can we help? Not
hey, Corey,
how can we, yep.
Somebody already came in and said, is that really safe?
Well,
do I need to run that through my EDR and MDR?
There's
Terry,
a 50-50 chance.
yeah, I would say that it's probably safe if it's coming from us, but you might want to run it through your EDR, MDR, just to make sure, because, you know, I don't know that I'd trust me. I mean, look, these good looks and that magnetic personality that I have may not be telling the truth, but thanks for bringing a little levity to it. Well, I hope everybody has gotten something out of this. We appreciate your time. We're going to give you 20 minutes back in your day, trying to keep it a little bit shorter. Look, I hope everybody's enjoying their October. I hope that for those of you that have children or grandchildren are really into the Halloween spirit, please go out and enjoy your time safely. I know last year my son was really upset that he didn't get to go trick-or-treating. So we're really excited this year that he's going to get out there, get some candy, enjoy some time, hang out with his buddies, act like a bunch of little hooligans, and be children. Appreciate everybody's time. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend.